Okay, so welcome. It is May 12th, and this is our Policy and Advocacy webinar update. If you're here with us, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. Remember, if you can, to please mute your microphone, and feel free to use the chat as well for any questions or knowledge exchange. Almost always there's someone who has a really good piece of information that makes us all smarter and more informed, so please do that. So here we go. We're going to actually start with our advocacy and organizing update, which is Rich Lean.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here with us this morning. I'm really excited to have you all and to give you guys some updates for this policy in action webinar. So some quick news and update. We will be starting our creative advocacy training next Friday. Is going to be our first session. And it is such an exciting time for us at Mass Creative. We had so many people registered. We had a cap at 50 for participant, but we have over 80 people who registered for it, and we had to create a wait list. So far, a lot of folks are confirming. All of our trainers are confirmed. The sessions are ready to roll out. So I'm just grateful to all of you guys who helped amplify this. And if you wanted to participate and missed it, don't worry, we will be bringing it back in the fall. But the May sessions will be starting next Friday, and I'm very excited for that. We are also finalizing our summer 2023 community days calendar, which is basically opportunities for us to be in community with you all. So as I always say, if you have events and you have efforts that you want us to amplify and you want us to be there for, please send it our way so we can add it to the calendar, because we want to make sure we spend the warmer weather out with you all in community as much as possible. Another great update to give, we do have a lot of campaigns that are officially launching. A lot of candidates are gathering signature. I'm pretty sure in your areas, a lot of people have been knocking on your doors or walking up to you at your local grocery store to ask for your signature to get on the ballot. What this means for us is just that we got to keep a little closer eyes on who's running and what open seats are available, and who are arts champion, like who are creative, who's for the creative sector, and what are efforts they're willing to put forth for us. So we're definitely going to be keeping an eye out on you for you all and giving you guys updates as time go. But in the meantime, don't forget to check your voter registration status to ensure that you are registered, so that when it's time to vote in your individual communities and towns, that you're able to do that. Another exciting thing for us, we will be welcoming 2 new interns this summer, and they're going to be starting later this month, early June. So I'm really excited to have them out, to have them with us, hopefully in the next policy and action webinar. My last update for you all was some of the community effort that Mass Creative did for last month. We went to Lawrence and got to meet with and two amazing partners such as Elevated Thoughts and Haverhill Creative Haverhill. And both of them just have like such beautiful spaces and beautiful effort that they're doing out in the Lawrence Haver community. And it was just an amazing time to be out there with them, to see like the work that they do, and hopefully later this summer to go to some of the amazing events and stuff that they're going to be doing. So it's just really cool to just be going to a different part of Mass and talking to different orgs and creative leaders and seeing the work that they're doing and how Mass Creative could amplify it. So it was a really great time for us. Some upcoming event for Mass Creative. We will be, I believe we mentioned this before, but we will be organizing an advocacy week in creative for the creative sector at the State House in January 2024. So we are in the planning of that, and we will be launching that very soon, so that way so we can start amplifying it, and you guys can help get our voices across the Commonwealth for more people to be able to at least participate in a day, if not the full week, connecting with legislative leaders and other art advocate in art artists. So that's something that we're going to be launching and working on soon. We are also planning to relaunch our the Create the Vote Fellowship later this fall in early 2024. As these election cycles continue to ramp up, we want to make sure like we get to continue to make sure that art and creative sector is a priority for a lot of legislators. As you guys see in the budget that has been announced by the Senate this past week, we are making progress, and we are doing what we can, but we have so much more to do. And one way that Mass Creative want to continue to do that work is by continuing to build art leaders up. Like, we want to target those who have the desire to do more but don't quite know what the next step is. So through this fellowship, we hope that it allows individual artists, the opportunity to learn how to continue to advocate for themselves in the sector. We also are open to consult for organization and individual artists on advocacy effort and policy agenda you guys may have. So please feel free to reach out to me via my email that I'm going to be putting in the chat, or to reach out to our organization in general, because we are a team and we love to do things as a team. So if you have any efforts or anything like that you want us to go over with you and to consult you on, like, we're more than happy to do so. And lastly, we are going to be, once we wrap up the creative advocacy training, we will be scheduling to relaunch it in the fall. So please keep your eyes out on that. So that's my update for this webinar. If you have any questions, my email is going to be in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you guys again for being here with us this morning.
Thank you, Richleen. And I also want to mention that last Friday, we had our open house, which some of you were on. And what was really great is we had someone from outside of Massachusetts join the call, which is exciting, but also that session is becoming more of a place where folks are brainstorming together or connecting and asking for information and information exchange. And we're all for it. I bring this up now because Richleen and Kelsey have such wealths of knowledge around various parts of the work that you care about when it comes to advocacy and cultural policy. And so do take us up on both the open house, and then also if there's specific questions or strategies that you want to work with us on, we are here for it. And the other thing I wanted to say is that so I've had several folks ask me to sign their nomination papers. And when they come up to me, they say, hey, I'm running for such and such. Would you sign my nomination papers? And I say, hey, why don't you tell me about your arts platform? Why don't you tell me about, like, what do you see? Like, what do you think about arts in Somerville? Like, what are the things that you are interested in? How do you see that working? Let me tell you what I know. So every moment, and oftentimes in the two most recent cases, those were the actual candidates running who were asking me to sign their nomination papers, as opposed to a supporter or a volunteer on the campaign. So take every opportunity that you have to engage with someone about making sure that they know you are a voter, and that you're paying attention to this as an issue, because that moves this along. So that's just my pro tip from earlier this week. So I'm going to move us pretty quickly into the policy and government action, because we actually have some special guests who are going to join us to talk about a particular bill. So let me just kind of go through this. So here we are in the midst of budget season, which I will confess to you, in previous years, I think we've all had a lot of anxiety about, right? Particularly the last, I would say, 3 years, when there was a real uncertainty around the economic vibrancy and tax revenue collection in that first year in 2020. But this year has been really great, and it didn't happen by accident, is sort of like my big headline, right? So we know that the House approved their budget and sent it over to the Senate, and they included $25 million for the Mass Cultural Council, which is the largest one-time annual investment into arts and culture that happens in the state. It also included about almost $900,000 in earmarks for 16 arts and cultural organizations. And again, just to put this into context, and we've talked about this before, this is an 11% increase from the operating budget for last year for the Mass Cultural Council, which means ostensibly that's an 11% increase in grant funding that they're able to put out. It's also, again, we know that this is the same number that Governor Healy proposed, and this is significantly higher than the highest amount that Governor Baker ever suggested. So we are moving in the right direction. Um, Earlier this week, we sent a thank you letter that many of you co-signed to House leadership, as well as the chair of Tourism, Arts and Cultural Development. And we actually got a note back from the chair of Tourism, Arts and Cultural Development saying, thank you, this means so much. And so thank yous do matter, and people do pay attention to that. This is part of like our ongoing cycle of making sure that our elected officials understand, we understand the process, and we are paying attention to the process. So if you didn't have a chance to co-sign that letter, feel free to drop a note to your state rep and just say, thank you so much. This is what it means to me and my creative practice, or this is what it means to my cultural organization, my creative organization. So now we've got more good news, right? So we've got our little like circles down here. So we're in May, we're in the Violet Senate budget. And the Senate Ways and Means, which is the first step in the Senate's process, they released their budget on Tuesday, and it's got 25 million for the Mass Cultural Council again. This is great. And our second bullet point is this doesn't happen by accident. This is because over many years, we have all worked together. We've united in this work to make sure that, that our legislators understand how important, how impactful this investment is, and that we're paying attention. So this isn't, tax revenues being what they are, it's great to see that the Senate has followed suit, but we're going to continue on with this process. So the way this works is Friday by 5 o'clock, all of the senators have to have all of their amendments that they want filed, and most of those amendments, right, are going to be earmarks. And then on May 22nd, they'll start debating the budget, which means they're going to consider all of those amendments and vote on all of those amendments. And we sort of anticipate that they will pass their version of the budget by Thursday of that week. So we should know going into, going into Memorial Day weekend, what the Senate's final budget is. And then after that, they will move to conference committee. And that's when the House and the Senate appoint negotiators, members of both of their chambers, to negotiate the differences between the two versions of the budget. Then once that's done, the legislature will pass the entire budget, and the hope is that it gets to the governor's desk in July for signing. So we continue to move on, and most likely, again, knock wood, if the Senate's version of the budget is 25 million or maybe more for the Mass Cultural Council, we'll offer an opportunity to send another thank you note, and for you all to sign that thank you note. Okay, so we've already talked about Mass Creative's legislative agenda, which includes 5 bills. And so there's one bill, the Downtown Vitality Act, that we were approached by MassINC, which is a incredibly well-respected think tank and advocacy organization in Massachusetts, to see if we would work with them and support the Downtown Vitality Act. And we thought we would take an opportunity today to invite Ben and Andre from MassINC to talk about this bill, and what it would mean for the creative sector. So Ben and Andre, you are here, I believe, right?
Yes, Emily. We're really excited to be here with you this morning, and thank you for the invitation.
So I can be your slide advancer if that's helpful as you all explain this bill.
Yeah, absolutely. MassINC is a nonpartisan think tank. We work on a lot of issues, but most of our work is focused on the gateway cities and making sure our urban communities are strong, inclusive, vibrant places where people find access to opportunity in the Commonwealth. We've been working on gateway cities for, 15 years now. We were there when Mass Creative was born, and we were so grateful that this organization was started, because at the time, I think the Mass Cultural Council had maybe a $6 million budget. It was incredibly anemic, nowhere near where it should have been. It's more than tripled since then. I can't think of too many other line items in the state budget that have had that kind of success, but I think there's no question that it needs to triple yet again. And we look forward to kind of thinking creatively with you all about ways that we can get more resources towards a sector that has never been more important to the social and economic fabric of the state. at the, right before COVID, we were working on a report looking at inclusive entrepreneurship, and it showed that the number of small businesses in Massachusetts have been declining for like 3 straight decades. And there's no question that that has an effect on communities. And there's no question that a big part of that trend was our population had become way more diverse, and people of color didn't have access to capital to start and grow businesses. So we put together this comprehensive bill with the Gateway Cities Legislative Caucus, which was chaired by Senator Lesser from Springfield at the time, and Representative Cabral in New Bedford, who remains the House chair. And one piece of that bill was this provision that would take money from online sales tax collections and bring it back to the community in the form of business improvement districts or district management entities. Basically groups that could market downtown or Main Street businesses, provide them with supports, program those spaces so that there's lots of things happening and people are back out in the communities patronizing small businesses. We put that in that bill, but we didn't build a coalition of support behind this small provision. But as chair of the Economic Development Committee, Senator Lesser actually got it into the economic development package that passed last session, but it didn't make it into the final bill. In part because we hadn't built that big umbrella of support for this. So, we refiled it this session as a standalone thing, and we're really trying to draw attention to this idea that in the post-COVID era, places more important than ever, or entities that are all about making places great spaces to be, have such a long proven track record. And I think we know from experience that gateway cities in particular just don't have the revenue generation ability on their own to support these entities at the level they need to be at in order to be successful. So, there is a pretty compelling case to be made that some state matching funds should be available. So, so this bill would provide that match basically. It would take 5% of the collections from the state's online sales tax collection to create that matching fund. We've written this in such a way that every community is working a little bit differently. Some have business improvement districts, some have cultural districts, some have parking benefit districts, which actually is a revenue mechanism to support some of the placemaking that goes on. It takes the parking meter revenue and uses it in that district for programming and marketing. But basically, we wrote this as a Big Tent sort of approach. Anything that looks like what we're talking about would be eligible for these matching grants. So we want to be as inclusive as possible, recognizing that communities have built things and we don't want them to have to build something new just to get a chance to get some of this money, because in the end, we're all trying to do very similar things. One of the things, we thought about in toward the idea of, being a Big Tent here is not just to make this a gateway city tool. We have plenty of things that are in state legislation that are for gateway cities only. And honestly, that has been a real headache for us because there's a lot of resentment. And I think we want all of our communities to be working toward vibrancy, no matter where they are in this state. So, we totally support the idea that these monies should be available to anybody, but we want to recognize that there's differences in the markets. And so, some places are going to need more help or more matching funds for every dollar they can raise locally. So I think that's something that can be done administratively to try and figure out what that looks like. I don't think the law needs to be that prescriptive, but our goal is to get something that everybody could use, but particular something that's going to work well for low-income areas and places where we have lots of small, diverse business owners that we particularly want to make sure that they're able to grow businesses that create wealth. And importantly, we want to make sure that we're preventing cultural displacement or commercial gentrification and so forth. So these entities and organizations, that's another way they could be helpful to us. We have a couple more slides. just in terms of structure, it would create this fund. The fund would be co-managed by Mass Development. Mass Development is particularly interested in this because of the work they've done through the Transformative Development Initiative, TDI. They're doing place-based district level work in.
Actually, Ben, can I jump in on that? Sorry, I don't mean to, just to correct you. That was the early version. The version that got filed actually has it with the EOHED.
Yeah. No, I don't know if Mass Development is managing it, but the board, where all these people would have input, are organizations that do have a stake in this. Mass Development is one of those organizations because of their work in TDI. Obviously, Mass Cultural Council because of their work with cultural districts. There are many business improvement districts that are actually organizing as organizations across the state that have similar interests. And then making sure that there's voice from underrepresented communities in the board that's setting up the structure for how these funds are deployed. So right now, this legislation is before the Joint Committee on Community Development and Small Businesses. Last time it went to the Economic Development Committee where it passed. Hopefully the Joint Committee on Community Development and Small Business will do the same thing. It's chaired by Senator Payano from Lawrence, who's a very strong supporter of the Gateway City's work. So hopefully with his leadership, we'll be able to make sure that this becomes a priority for the committee. And just continuing along, Emily. A couple of questions that have come up repeatedly for us is how much money is this going to be? 5% of online sales tax collection. We do not know. We've been trying to get DOR to give us the answer to that question. We continue to ask, but I think we have a sense that it's going to be a very large number. And again, we think 5% of whatever that pie is, given the impact that online retailing has had on our commercial districts, is a pretty reasonable ask to have. We're waiting to find out about hearings on this. And I think the other big question we have is this was written under the assumption that we would have one secretariat for housing and economic development, and those secretariats are that secretariat's going to be divided, and we still don't know where community development is going to go. So the Department of Housing and Community Development has administered our Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. So wherever that goes is likely to be the home for this. So we've got to figure out what secretariat that's going to fall in the future. I think with all your work, talking to your legislators about this and letting them know that it's something that is exciting to you and would be beneficial, it makes a huge difference. We're going to put together a large campaign and try and get lots of different organizations that would be interested in this. Everything from the arts organizations to those who are representing retailers and small businesses, I think could find this really enticing. So every community has different groups, and helping us figure out who are the groups in your community that would be natural allies for this will be really important as we build that coalition. So that's kind of the idea. I don't know, Audra, if there's anything I left out or there are questions you guys have that we can answer for you.
I'll just add 2 cents here, and thank you, Ben, for jumping in. I had to deal unexpectedly with a personal issue, so I'm on the road. But I'll just say, this is a great opportunity to support placemaking in our communities, right? And one thing that we've, in all my work in community development that we've realized is that no one sector alone, not the nonprofit sector, not the the private sector, and not even local government has the capacity to take care of our special places in the state and support placemaking on a regular basis. And so what we need to do is create sustainable governance models at the district level, as well as sustainable financing models. And I know, you in the arts community have really dealt with this through the cultural districts, where you've created that governance model, but there's been no sustainable financing source. This is a way to kind of bring it all together. And so the vision that we want to see are, dozens of wonderful, vibrant, unique local districts all over the state and communities large and small. And we think this legislation and this fund can do that. So, really excited to work with Mass Creative. I think it's a great opportunity to bring, create local and state partnerships between the arts community and between the business community and other allies. And so I think we could have a really exciting campaign this year.
And just, the last thing I would add too, in terms of the advocacy strategy here, in the next few weeks, I think the governor is going to launch her economic development planning process. I don't know if you all have talked about that yet, but, they will be traveling the state, going to every community and region and asking what they need and what should be a priority and to grow in the economy. I think it's really important that they hear we need inclusive economic growth. And I think it's really important that they hear that this tool is could be transformative in helping places where lots of small inclusive businesses are doing well really thrive. If the administration embraces this and put this in their first economic development bill, which will be filed around this time or a little earlier next year, that could really help us get it over the finish line.
Ben and Andre, thank you so much for kind of walking us through this bill. Just a couple of things, and I believe they're in the chat. So definitely, this is something that you can absolutely talk to your legislators about. If you have a relationship with them already, drop a note. If you don't, or you want to look up who your legislators are, we added that link in the chat. And then we have sort of an ongoing open sort of form you can use to write a note to your legislator and ask them to sponsor and support the entire creative sector legislative agenda, which this bill is one of the 5. So if you don't have the time to do a personalized note, that can work too, but personalized is always better. I'm really glad, Ben, that you brought up the piece about how there is an existing governance structure for many communities around cultural economy work, right, with the cultural districts. And as someone who is actually a former director of a cultural district, one of the things that was that was a big obstacle, right, was that there was this definition, but there wasn't any money to do anything. And so I just think about what it would have been like if there was the opportunity for real sustained financial investment from the state coming to our efforts in Lynn, and how much quicker things could have moved. They're in a great place now, and I'm so impressed with the work that's happened, but it's this kind of thinking and this kind of sort of, as we've talked about, as Andre pointed out, like this comprehensive look at how downtowns and main streets are animated and that they need investment that we need to talk about and need to have happen. So I also love, Ben, that you brought up this one piece of technical work, right? Which is a lot of bills that get filed at the beginning of a legislative session in Massachusetts. Yes, they will all get a hearing, right? That's part of the work of the legislature, but a lot of them are filed, and in some ways the intention is to make sure that that language is available so it can be lifted and dropped into other larger pieces of legislation, right? So that's what we did with the economic recovery, right? What we had a bill that Senator Kennedy had filed that was about creative sector recovery from COVID, and that language got dropped directly into the legislature's eventual COVID spending plan, ARPA spending plan, right? And so this idea that we've got this bill filed, we're going to work and talk and support this bill, and then next year, when Governor Healy files her economic development bill, which, as Ben pointed out, gets filed in the second year of the session traditionally, that there's already a track record there and of committed support that will make it easier to potentially have this language in that larger bill. So that's just like a little bit of inside strategy thinking, and it's why now it's so important to be talking to both lawmakers and folks in the Healy administration about why this matters. So thank you, Ben, for raising that point. I want to open up and see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and just say, hey, Em, I got a question, or I think I can see if you raise your hand. I should be able to see that too.
Hi, this is Margot and from New Bedford.
Hey, Margot, I was thinking you
So
have one of the sponsors as your rep.
Yes, so very excited to hear about this, and I'll be mentioning it to Derek Santos, our executive director of the EDC. We are a gateway city. We're Seaport Cultural District. We have had 2 TDIs. We're the TDI Creative City. So I am excited about this because we are very thankful and grateful for sustainable funding from the city's Arts, Culture, and Tourism Fund, but it doesn't nearly cover all of the needs of artists, small businesses, and creative enterprises. And we are seeing that firsthand this year because we did have ARPA funding go towards these groups. And so we have, anyway, this is not a question, but I am very interested in supporting this, and whatever we need to do, we'll do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you for your support, Margot, and that you mentioned Derek, because one thing I should have mentioned is, last year when we put the bill forward and didn't build a real coalition around it, we didn't really have much coordination with gateway cities and their leaders. But this time we've been talking with mayors and economic development directors about this. We meet with Derek and his peers from all the gateway cities every month. And we kept bringing this up and asking them what they thought, and they kept saying, yes, this is a high priority for us. So, we did a transition memo for the Healy administration. This was one of the things high on the list for them. And, the mayors are committed to being co-advocates for this. So when you talk with him, he'll know what you're talking about already.
Okay, great. And I'm not as involved in this, but I know that they have the Secretary of Economic Development coming to New Bedford in June. So I'm wondering if there's some coordination we can do with this.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the kind of thing we need, Margot. That's where you can say to Derek, hey, I know you've talked to MassINC about this. This is really important to us. Can you make sure that you put that bug in the secretary's ear when she's in town? Because that's the kind of thing that's going to make the difference. The more people that bring that up on visits and say, look, we've done incredible work, but we can still take it to the next level with this kind of state partnership.
Great, thank you.
Margot, I also want to say I appreciate you pointing out that, right, advocacy doesn't just have to be to our elected officials, right? So many of you are part of efforts that already include chambers of commerce, local departments of economic development. And this is something that if you are already in those conversations or networks to bring up, right? So I think we can do some of that advocacy and that amplification throughout our networks and with our sort of shared peers who are working on coalition projects in our downtown and main streets already.
And doing that work regionally really helps too. If she's in New Bedford, there's a good chance she's going to be in Fall River that afternoon. So making sure the folks in Fall River are going to say the same thing to her really helps. So, the more that you guys are talking to each other in your regions and strategizing like that, I think the more effective will be.
Oh, Ben, Fall River and New Bedford and their municipal cultural leaders, Margot, are fantastic about coordination now. They're really a power team.
We have a monthly meeting with Fall River Arts and Culture, so I'll be mentioning this to them.
Thanks, Martin. Right. Other questions, other thoughts, other things you want to talk about related to this bill? Well, Ben and Andre, thank you so much for. Maureen, you have a question.
Yeah, just a quick question. I don't know if there are any other co-sponsors yet, or if that will be listed somewhere. I just know because there have been times we've been asked to ask somebody to co-sponsor, and then it turns out they already have, and then you kind of look like you don't know what you're doing. So.
Okay. Yeah, we can add a little feature on our list of on our legislative agenda that sort of notes who the co-sponsors are already. That's a great point. Maureen, keep them coming. You're making our work better. Thank you.
And Maureen, I'll just say that there's not that many co-sponsors because we really haven't mounted an effort yet. So I think that there's a handful, and there's a link. Kelsey just dropped it into the chat, but it's more than likely your legislators are not yet co-sponsors.
Well, I just know John Barrett from North Adams is our rep, and John Barrett is usually all in on all of these kinds of things for low-income communities, for arts and culture. And there was one time I wrote, and his aide said, "Oh yeah, we're already there," and it's like, "Oh, okay, thanks, never mind."
Well, you know what? That's also, Maureen, sometimes that happens. And the greatest reply is like, that's so great. Like, I knew I could count on you, right? Like,
Well, you tend to reach out and thank him when we know he's doing things. That's all. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
Maureen, sorry, if I can jump in for a second, just in case this will be helpful to you and your advocacy, not only for this legislative agenda, but for other bills that you're supporting or hoping to support. If you go to the MA legislature website and look up the docket number, there is a tab there where you can see the list of running co-sponsors for both the House bills and the Senate bills.
Great, Kelsey. Thank you.
anyone else? This is great. Ben and Andre, thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for this partnership and collaboration. This is what it's all about. We know that arts and culture doesn't happen in a vacuum. We both have, we provide great value, and then we also are part of connections that impact us. And so we're glad to be a part of this work with you. I am going to just move us to just a reminder. So aside from the Creative Advocacy Training Series, which the registration has now closed, we've got two other things that are coming up next month. We have our next open house, which will be June 2nd, and our next policy and action update webinar, which will be June 9th. You'll notice these times are later than usual, and that's to allow for the advocacy training series to happen. So if mornings are a tough haul for you, congratulations. In the month of June, it'll be a lunch meeting instead of a breakfast meeting. I also wanted to just pause and see if folks had any other sort of general questions about any of the topics we talked about today. I don't think we do. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, well, in that case, everyone, thank you so much for being part of this morning's webinar. It is always good to see your faces, and we will be sending out a summary with all the things we talked about tomorrow. Thank you, Ben and Andre, I think Andre had to drop off, so thank you, Ben, again.
Thank you, appreciate it.
No problem, and thank you to the team, to Kelsey and Richleen. Team Mass Creative is, we're working together and we're here for you. So have great days all.